So back in April, I went to my retinal specialist, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is my vision is still 20/70. The bad news is we had to use the pinholes to get there. What are the pinholes? For those of you who you can see a pair of glasses in front of you with little dots on them, otherwise the lens is opaque. That is what we mean by the pinholes. Now, in a doctor's office, you will see pinholes on a stick sort of thing, and the doctor will ask you to read through them. The idea being that any glare, any distractions that you might be picking up that might inhibit your ability to focus are thus eliminated, and that's what it took to get me to that 20/70 mark. Now here's the thing. About a year ago I had cataract surgery, and immediately after the surgery I didn't even need the pinholes to get there. After about 6 months I noticed that my vision was changing. People who have had cataract surgery have a 20% chance, and I'm now in this 20%, of getting a condition known as post-capsular opacity. How many people that have the condition maybe think that it's another cataract? It's not. So post-capsular opacity, and you'll notice, by the way, that I'm back to using my full screen magnification with my arrow enhancements and my screen enhancements. Okay. So the post-capsular opacity, you can see that there's a bit of a haze here in the back. That's what's going to happen when this gets really bad. How long will that take? I hope it takes as long as it can. Yeah. Now, immediately there's no danger. My retinal specialist said that we're not in any immediate threat zone. When that does get to that point, and a lot of people are saying, well, wait a moment, what about if? Here's what I've noticed. The increase in PCO, post-capsular opacity, has helped to explain a number of things. One, if I'm in my classroom under bright fluorescent lights, it tends to get worse. Okay? Because you've got all that glare bouncing off. It produces letters that have a shadow effect. Okay? And I notice it mostly, again, in the bright fluorescent lighting of my classrooms. Unfortunately, this has also led to headaches after 3-hour lectures. That said, I go to sleep, I wake up, everything's fine. It's due to the eye strain. And this is only going to increase. My retinal specialist wants to wait to perform the procedure until we have no other choice. Now, that's going to be a good while, I suspect. It's going to be just like the cataract all over again. And with the cataract, it took several years to get to the point where we needed to operate. This time, though, they're not going to put me under. In fact, the procedure has become even more dangerous. So the post-capsular opacity is here in the back of the eye, okay? And for those of you who cannot see, basically what we have is a cutaway of the eye, and they are pointing various lines to areas. So the post-capsular opacity is, again, in the back of the capsule of the eye. What they are going to do is they're going to take a laser beam and they're going to cut holes in through the intraocular lens, basically the implanted lens that contains my prescription. That's actually a lot less complicated than having to put me under and take a little spinny gizmo, break up the original cataract, suck it out, and put in the IOL, intraocular lens. So you're probably thinking, well, wait a moment. Just a moment ago I mentioned this was more dangerous, right? The laser. Laser is what makes this more dangerous. I have a condition, for those of you who are unaware, that is known as retinopathy of prematurity, which is to say that my retina detached when I was an infant and cryosurgery put it back together. But my entire life, I was basically living with a surgically tampered with retina. Now, a retina is like a piece of string, a very fragile piece of string. You know how sometimes when you pull a piece of string and it breaks? Okay? Or like a toothpick. Maybe a toothpick would be a better example. You know how you bend a toothpick and it breaks? Pulling on the retina, same problem. The laser procedure can increase the risk of this happening. And if the retina is pulled upon, I could see a flash, basically a light show. And a lot of people are very excited about light shows. Believe me, this light show is nothing to be excited about. Okay? The possibility for a retinal detachment is considered a medical emergency. And I would need to call emergency personnel immediately, or at the very least, a family member who can get me to the doc post haste. Now, I was actually afraid that that was going to happen last year. Early on in my recovery, I fell asleep, and I must have accidentally rubbed, and the key word being accidentally, you never, under any circumstances, after a procedure, would want to rub the eye. But I must have done it in my sleep, and I saw this bright flash of light, as in nothing I've ever seen before. It's kind of like staring straight into a lightning bolt right as it strikes. Okay? I literally jumped out of bed, basically threw myself up, jumped out of bed, and was hyperventilating like you wouldn't believe, and panicking. Okay? I monitored the condition for about an hour before I got back to sleep, and thankfully nothing has come of it. But it's that kind of sudden, unexpected boom, like a lightning bolt kind of flash. And it's not a little streak either. It's like literally staring straight into a lightning bolt, like the lightning bolt strikes inches away from your eyes, and it's an overwhelming sensation of light. Okay? That's the sort of thing you want to be aware of, that you want to be on the lookout for. And the laser procedure to correct the PCO can increase this risk of happening. And if that happens, again, I need to call medical personnel or a family member. Now, before people are saying, well, wait a moment, you just had the surgery, it's a very gradual increase, etc., etc. Yes, it is. But I want to turn to my current phone situation. And what does this have to do with that? Well, we go back to the fact that if something happens, I need to call emergency personnel immediately. Okay? And if I end up unable to use my vision, I need a phone that works and works now. My Google Pixel has served me well for the last year and a half, but I put up a video about a month ago mentioning that I needed a new phone. I mentioned that I probably would not be abandoning Android. That thought has changed, and a lot of people are probably going to shake me silly, saying, "What the heck are you doing? You keep bouncing back and forth." It goes back to my vision. It goes back to the fragility of my condition and the fact that I tend to keep my phones for about 3 years, 2 to 3 years. This phone would be replaced in just under two, about 2 months before the 2-year mark, making it the shortest amount of time I've ever held on to a phone. So I went to Best Buy today, and I took a look at a product red iPhone 8 Plus. When I was using it, I felt a sense of relief, because I've been using VoiceOver now for what'll be 10 years next year. I loved the current iPhone design with the stereo speakers, wireless charging, water resistance, and again, that sense of familiarity, knowing that I know how to use VoiceOver and I could immediately kick it into high gear if I needed to. Whereas with the Google Pixel, it's in such a state where if it decides to lock up right when I need it, you don't want that, especially not during an emergency. And a lot of people are saying, well, nothing's happening now. We go back to the whole business of how I was going to keep my phone for 2 to 3 years. I'd rather have a phone that I know is usable and not need it, rather than have a phone that I suddenly need to use the speech on and can't. I know enough of Android and TalkBack to get around, but I can't have a phone that struggles. Okay? I can't have a phone that hesitates, that locks up. The Pixel is currently in that state. And if I have a phone that's in that state and I'm already having trouble using the screen reader, I can get around with TalkBack for the most part. But if I needed to look up a medication online, I would have problems because I don't yet know how to effectively utilize the gestures in Android to browse the web. Some of these gestures require multiple finger movements like down and right. Well, because of my depth perception and the fact that I only have usable vision out of my left eye, everything slants to the left in the way that I work. I tend to, if I write something on a piece of paper, it tends to go in a downward slant. If you look at the margins, they're never straight. The writing is straight, but the margins themselves are not. The left margin always slants inward. And if I required a multiple gesture to get to a particular setting, I'd really rather not take the chance of having a device that I can use, but it decides to be funny. Android has too many unpredictable variables: hardware, software, skins. And a lot of people these days are going to Samsung. That's great. Samsung has made a lot of progress. But which would you rather have? I mean, having something new is great. But if you're looking at something where you need to be more productive and need to get things done and, heaven forbid, need to contact an emergency number, I'd rather have something familiar. And for me, that is the iPhone. Interestingly enough, there are also little things. For example, I can add a new folder in Gmail on the iPhone, but I can't on Android. And that's something I've never been able to figure out. I don't understand why I can add a new folder. And I use folders all the time, okay? Because I tend to get a lot of emails that group into the same category. And what I'll do is if I want to hold on to the email, I'll put it into the folder so I can come back to it later. And a lot of times I like to create a new folder for a new category of email. And again, I can't seem to do that on Android for some weird reason. Now, I was going to save this email for this video for WWDC next week, but I decided to go ahead and put it out ahead of time because, like I said, when I went to Best Buy, I felt that sense of familiarity with OS X, with iOS. Same thing with OS X, too, because I did take a look at the MacBook Pro. Now, the Mac OS and Spotify have an interesting problem. Everything on Spotify is navigable until I get to my albums. Apparently, it shows a table with nothing there, and I don't know why that is. I'm going to try Spotify on iOS next using my iPad Pro. But I don't understand why that is. So depending on how things go, I don't even know what my next computing venture is going to be. It may end up being an iPhone with a Bluetooth keyboard that I found on Amazon that's very ergonomic, very nice, with VoiceOver and a Bluetooth headset. I genuinely do not know where I'm going from here, because knowing that my vision is slowly getting worse and will eventually end up resulting in a laser procedure that could end up taking my vision from the attempt, which would you rather be, overprepared or underprepared, given the circumstances? I've been a fan of the iPhone X, but I haven't really spent enough time with it because they haven't had any demo units. When I did look at the iPhone X, I know that last year I did take a look at the iPhone X and I was like, meh. Android is starting to incorporate a lot of these gestures. Android P is incorporating a lot of iOS gestures. A lot of the Android hardware makers are taking their own take on the iPhone X design. If this is going to be the future, then I may as well stick to as much familiarity as I can. And again, that has to do with VoiceOver. Plus, a bigger screen means a bigger on-screen Braille keyboard. On my iPhone, when I'm using VoiceOver, and on my iPad too, when I couldn't utilize the keyboard cover for whatever reason, because sometimes it likes to be temperamental, I would use the on-screen Braille keyboard, and the bigger the screen, the bigger the keyboard, the less chance I have of my fingers literally ending up in knots with one another. Because I remember there was one time on my iPhone 6 Plus where dot 4 was directly underneath dot 1. So it ended up being a rather cramped typing experience. And no matter what I did to try to realign the dots, it ended up in a situation where dots 3 and 6 ended up halfway off the screen. So, yeah. Personally, if I were to get a new device and I wanted an iPhone, this is the rumor of what to expect. For those of you who cannot see, we've got an iPhone 6 size device, iPhone 7, iPhone 8 size device. That is a 5.8-inch OLED screen. We've got an iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus that is a 6.5-inch OLED screen, and we've got a tweener, sort of in-betweener. Excuse me, that's a 6.1-inch TFT LCD. I mean, personally, I would probably go for that 6.1-inch TFT LCD because I would get the stereo speakers, water resistance, presuming that makes it to the cheaper models, which I would assume that it would, because it's becoming a staple. I think it would be crazy for Apple not to have this. Wireless charging, waterproof stereo speakers, and a bigger screen for a device that is smaller than the Google Pixel. You know, I just think it'd be really nice to have. But no, basically that's what's going on. As the years go on, there's no telling what could happen to my vision, and I'd rather have a device that I'm comfortable with and I could switch the speech on and continue using it like it's no big deal. Whereas I've noticed that when I try to use Android and switch over between TalkBack and the site and the visual interface, for the most part I can get by, but there are some areas where I genuinely feel like I'm struggling. So I just wanted to get that off my chest, but feel free to comment. Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.